Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm Angela, and before we start, make sure you like and subscribe so that you don't miss any of our episodes. We've got a wonderful guest here today. I am truly honored to welcome a very, very special guest to the Awaken Your Soul's Journey podcast. If you've ever experienced the loss of someone you love, and I know many of you have, then you know grief isn't something we simply move through and leave behind. It changes us and it asks us to find a new way of living while carrying love that never ends. So, my guest today is Patti Comeau-Simonson, a peer grief specialist and bereavement professional who has been supporting grieving individuals and families since 2007. She holds a thanatology certificate from the National Center for Death Education, is the author of Recipes for Healing, Writing Through Grief One Plate at a Time, and the co-author of a book of hope, and is the recipient of the Red Cross Healthcare Award. But what makes Patti's work so meaningful isn't simply her credentials. It's the heart she brings to every conversation Patti speaks from lived experience. She knows what it is to love deeply, to endure profound loss, and to make the courageous choice day after day to continue moving forward with hope. This conversation will be honest, compassionate, and surprisingly full of light. And we'll explore the realities of grief, the importance of feeling seen, and how healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means learning to carry our love in new ways. And along the way, I have no doubt that you'll find moments of comfort, connection, and even a few smiles. Okay, please join me in welcoming this wonderful Patti Comeau-Simonson.
Thank you, Angela. It's very, very nice to be here. I'm excited. Thank you.
Yes, me too. And we share a common loss. We both lost our husbands. You lost your husband, David. And that would have changed, just like mine, the entire direction of your life. And how did you give us a little more background on that? And just how did you find your way back to joy again?
Well, it wasn't overnight for sure.
Hmm.
It wasn't in several months or even a year for sure. I think the most important thing was that eventually David passed the last month or so before he passed. He was on hospice care. And it was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful, not only for his care, but for myself and my family. And at that time, even in the mix of all of that, I felt someday I hope I'm able to give back something.
Hmm.
And so, again, it didn't happen overnight, naturally. You're just striving to get through each single day, as you well know. And that's a big job, quite frankly.
Yes.
And so, anyway, eventually I did see a little ad. It was probably a year and a half or so afterwards that hospice was going to be doing a training of volunteers. And so I went and signed up for it, and I did the training, and then I volunteered for hospice for almost 12 years. And the role I played was doing home care. I could eke out a few hours a week. And the home care meant that I would go and be with the patients while the caregivers were having some respite time, doing whatever it was they needed to do. And you and I both know the caregivers do need respite.
Yes.
And just to have a cup of coffee, for goodness sakes.
Yes.
So anyway, I did that, and I found it to be the most rewarding, most unbelievable time in my life where I just were with people in their sacred space.
Hmm.
And it was wonderful. And so being there for as many years as a volunteer, I got to know many, many, many people in the organization. And one day, the bereavement coordinator called me and said that there was a job opening for a bereavement assistant and that it was a part-time job and that was fine. And it would be this be something that I wanted. And I was like, yikes. I jumped at it. My time was more, I had more available time. And so anyway, I took that job and it was amazing. And in that job, I started out part-time. It eventually became full-time. And my coworkers, who were all younger than me, I was 46 when David died, but this was now I was like in my early 50s. And so they suggested I go back to school, which I thought was the most ridiculous idea I'd ever heard of, but thought, well, I did want to hone my skills. My job as a bereavement assistant was actually speaking to the patients that had died families and directing them into where they needed to go, whether it be one-on-one counseling or support groups, any of that. So that was really my job. So I thought, well, okay, I'll give it a try. I did, long story short, and got my certificate in thanatology. And it was amazing. Many, many years later, and people maybe might not understand this, but because I would have never have said this in the beginning, certainly. I feel, number one, that this job I never, ever would have done. I wouldn't have ever been familiar with it had I not lost David.
Yes.
So, in a sense, because it's a job that I was meant to do, and I've had several professions, and this one was the job that I was meant to do. It just gave me such a connection. And so, in a sense, David left me with a gift.
Mhm.
And I say that as a beautiful, beautiful thing, because of course he's always with me every day. I do feel that way. So it gave me a purpose that I would have never have dreamt that I would have had, you know. So that's how I got through. I think the initial piece was volunteering. I was giving myself to something that I cared about.
So you felt that this was a real gift, and I feel the same way too. Like
Mm,
I know that that's really hard for people to hear, and
yeah,
I would not have wanted to hear that in the
me
beginning
too.
either. That's not um, in those beginning throes of grief, you're not interested in any of that kind of information.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it does give you some hope and inspiration for the future to see other widows being able to move through and find that joy. You've walked alongside grieving people for
Mm,
like 20 years now?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And
yep.
and so there's a lot of misconceptions I know about grief, and I know you will have had experience with those um, in our culture. Like,
Mm.
what kinds of things have you seen over that time?
Well, I think so many people don't think that they can just sort of rush through. And that always surprises me. And maybe because having gone through it, I realize you can't rush
Mhm.
through it. You just can't. So the truth is that you have to do the work. You can't, you have to walk through it. You can't go around it. It just is impossible. Because if you don't do the work, it will come back at a later time and
Mhm.
really affect you in your health, in your mental state. It'll affect you in a lot of ways. And so I think that is always been surprising to me in that people feel like they can get through it quickly, or they're surprised. And I was surprised too. You probably will relate to this. When you think you're doing so good, and then, even as far down as a year or two afterwards, and you may hear a song or a thought may just come in your head and it will just bring you right down.
Mhm.
But that's all part of it as well, and my what I say is to go with it. Whatever happens, just go right with it. Don't try to stop it because it's part of it. I
Mhm.
always say grief will soften as you go along. But this culture is, our culture is so, it is so different from so many other cultures. I believe in rituals. I truly do, because other cultures, that's how they get through, by
Yeah.
specific rituals, and they're beautiful and they're helpful. And so I believe in rituals, any kind of ritual that just brings you sort of peace for the moment. It's
Mhm.
taking things bit by bit. Um, so I just think people are mostly, they're in a hurry,
Yeah.
and they don't, they want it to be over quick, like, and
Yeah.
it just doesn't work that way generally. I mean,
Yeah.
we all have our own time frame,
Hmm.
and it's unique. It's different for everybody. Everyone is different, and they handle it differently. But the fact is that it's not something that can be rushed, no matter how unique it is, no matter how different it is. It can't be rushed. It has to be taken, you know, just one step at a time, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wholeheartedly agree with all of that you just said. And I felt that way too at the beginning. I really wanted it over with. So what do I have to
Sure.
do?
Hmm.
XYZ, come on, tell me with the steps, and then I'll just do that and we'll be done with
Exactly. Exactly.
this.
Yes.
And
Yep.
and I remember going to my grief coach and basically saying that, like, what do I need to do? And she's like, well, everybody's journey is different and you'll
Mm.
discover this on your own. And she was there with me, helping me do the work. You talk about the work that
Mm.
needs to be done, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about that
Yeah.
because we are always talking about the heart work that we need to do to get through these things. What's some of the things that you did?
Well, it evolves too. It changes along the way. What you're
Mm,
doing the first part of that horrific, gut-wrenching time is you are striving to get up each day
mhm,
and get through the day, whatever that looks like. For me, I had to get into the office because I was left to run a heating company that I did not want to do. And
mm,
but I had to. I had no choice. So it's getting up. People oftentimes, women in particular too, will say, somebody will say to them, you seem like you're doing so well. You must be so strong. And the fact of the matter is inside you want to say, no, I'm not either. But you might end up saying, I'm really not that strong. I have some really bad days. And the thing of it is that what most people end up saying though is, well, I have no choice. This
yeah.
is it.
Mhm.
Well, you know what? My way of thinking is that you do have a choice. And to get up each day is a choice. And thank goodness, because you could be doing something else, like staying in bed all day.
Right.
Getting yourself, you mentioned support. You had a grief coach. I am I am so big about that. That's what I do too, is run support groups and do counseling. We need to have a support system. Everybody has to have a support system. And hopefully it is your family and your friends or your rabbi or your ministers or your priest. But to have a grief coach, a bereavement counselor, a peer specialist, they, to me, are really what are so helpful because, our families, they love us so much and they don't want to hurt us and make it more difficult than they think it already is. And the
Mhm.
fact of the matter is that no matter, you can't, and then we as the grievers feel like we can't really express what we'd like to because we don't want to burden them and tell them
Hmm.
how it really is.
Right.
So, but you can burden a grief coach or a peer specialist. You can do that because they are skilled. They're coming from not a real personal place like your family or your friends. And so they can help you see things that a family member or a good friend wants to do, but really can't because they're emotionally not. But let's not forget, they're grieving as well, uh,
Hmm.
differently, but
Yes.
nonetheless, they're grieving, you know? So I think getting good support, I got excellent support. You know, I really had wonderful support. And my first support group for a loss of spouse, I would add this. If you've lost a parent or a child or a spouse or partner, who, whatever your grief loss is, I strongly suggest to get into that specific loss
Mhm.
because I've found over the years that I've had many people actually, when they first have had a loss, that they would get into a general loss group.
Right.
And that could be many losses. And it doesn't always work. As a matter of fact, in most cases, it doesn't work. You need to be with people who have experienced the same loss as yourselves. Obviously different situations, but
Hmm.
nonetheless, a loss of spouse, adults who've lost a parent, you need to be in that particular group because the members of that particular group are also experiencing the same things that you
Yes.
are, believe it or not.
Hmm.
So you're not alone. You don't feel alone. And so that's the first time of sort of getting out socially, too. It was for
Right.
me. It kind of is for most people, you know. Um, and then I'm a big proponent for volunteering in anything that you might be passionate about, as it was for me. It happened to be hospice. But I mean, there are so many other things that you can volunteer your time with. And it just gets you out, like I said earlier, of your head and give of yourself.
Hmm.
And I just found that very helpful. And the people that I counsel and have worked with over the years, the same thing, you know. So one of the women that lost her spouse went through the regular support group, then went through my peer group, and then went through the training when the time was appropriate to become a peer facilitator.
Hmm.
And amazing. She was one of the best peer facilitators for sure. And how she just started to little by little find joy again is to go out and photograph, take pictures of sunrises and sunsets. And she has become an amazing photographer. In the meantime, has published beautiful coffee table books.
Mm.
um, but that's how she started, you know, to find the
Hmm.
joy. So you find joy in little small bits at
Yeah.
a time, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can see how that would be different for everyone,
Mm,
finding that little niche or thing that you're interested in. And I always tell people, if you think about when you were young and what you loved to do, sometimes there can be a
absolutely.
clue there to what you would enjoy. And it's
That you
sometimes
have
it's,
time with. You have time because you
yeah,
really haven't had time. If you're living a life, you haven't had that time to do that, but you find that you
exactly.
do.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And it is comforting to have someone that's gone through a similar loss for sure. Um, I know in my group, often they will pair off or
Mhm.
um, meet with each other outside of the group when they have those similarities and discuss further, which I think is so powerful. Um,
Oh, it
being able to
definitely
help each
is.
other.
It really is. You develop a bond
Yes.
like no other.
Yes.
You just really do, and it's a wonderful thing, and it's very powerful. It is. It's a wonderful thing. And when you step back and think about that, I think that's so amazing that this woman that I just spoke of has become a very good friend of mine.
Mm,
She was actually the co-author of my first book, A Book of Hope.
nice.
And so, yeah, it's you just don't know. You just don't.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't. You don't know what
No,
surprises are waiting for you.
exactly.
Yeah. So I
Exactly.
want to get into um, how food becomes part of your healing
Yeah.
and like what inspired you to write recipes for healing.
Well, it's funny. I have to say, I never thought that I would write my new book is the publishers call it a teaching memoir. And it
Mm,
is. That's basically what it is. But of course, it has recipes at the end, at the back of the book. And throughout the book, I talk about the importance of food and the various foods that were at any given time. For me, the book I always hoped to write was a cookbook. Since I've
mm,
done that, since I was a little girl, I love to cook. That is the first thing. I love to cook, and I for me, it's always been cooking is about sharing. It's about comfort. It's very comforting, and even today, having a bad day or whatever. I will cook because I it gives me comfort. But at the time, so I have always loved to cook. Maybe through David, whole nine yards. I came to this because I was in a retreat. I do a lot of spirituality, healing with angels retreats.
mm.
And I have some wonderful, wonderful friends, and they always have known that I like to cook. And it's always the same group of women that are in this retreat each year. So we've come to know each other, and it's really wonderful. So they know that how much I love to cook. They also know the situation and all of the, and my loss and all of that. And David is always there at the retreat too. So they really are in
Yeah.
full force with that. And so they said, you maybe you should. I thought, gee, maybe I'll write a book of recipes that then tell the reason why they were important. I have to preface this with the year before David died, my mom passed away.
Mm.
And the year before that, my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, was killed. So within
Wow.
3 years, we had three major losses, the
Yeah.
last one being the love of my life. And so they knowing all of that, they said, well, why don't you write, a book, about the grief and the loss, and then just tie in the recipes and all of that, because I looked to it um, as comfort. When towards the end, where when David, with the last month of his life, well, even before that, we were so busy with doctor's appointments, all his treatments, everything that was going on, as well as running a heating company. And so I could control none of that, none of it. I had no control, which was very, very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And the only time I had control is when I went into the kitchen
Hmm.
and cooked, because in my mind at that point was thinking I'm cooking something that's going to be healing for David and give him comfort. And I had complete control in that domain. I knew exactly what I was doing, what was involved in just everything. Where outside of that, I didn't.
Right.
So it was a tool for me in that anticipatory grief. It's what I really needed to get through that time.
Right.
Um, After he passed, I then didn't want to cook or eat or do
Mm.
any of that for a while, which is very normal for many, many people. And of course, that changes, thankfully. And in my first support group that I went to, it was a loss of spouse support group. At the time, they did not have young widowed support groups, which they do now, of course, thank heavens. But then they didn't. And so the group, I was the youngest in the group. The group of women that were there were they were probably my age now, in their 70s, and each week they'd come in talking about everything they cooked and for their grandchildren but that was how they were healing. That was
Right.
gave them comfort. And that was when I thought to myself, I should really get back into this. And so I did. And those group of women that I had met yearly, twice a year, suggested the book. I went to a conference, a Hay House conference, and met a literary agent, suggested I wanted to do just little recipes and blah blah. And she said, "No, no, no, no. You need to tell the whole story." I wasn't planning on telling the whole story.
Yeah.
I wasn't planning on telling the whole journey. I didn't, that wasn't I had no intention. But she felt that that was the way to go. And she said, and then the recipes will be like the little frosting at the end. And so it was. So, but I guess I'm sorry if this is kind of a roundabout way
No,
of
no.
answering, but food is comforting. And even if you don't like to cook, you do have to eat. And in most cases, food gives pretty much everybody comfort when they do eat. If you do like to cook like me, for me, that's even better because it's the process of the cutting, the chopping,
Right.
the aromas, all of that just was a companion for me. It was a tool, another tool, and in a way, a ritual for me. And I love to cook for people and to share. And so that was all part of it too. So that's really how the book came about. So
Wow.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. And, I'm sure that as you wrote that, it was healing for
oh,
you to write that story and so wonderful that you could share your insights with other people,
mm,
and
yeah,
because I think that's really important. Um,
yeah,
I think that no two books will have exactly the same um, flavor to them because
yeah,
we're so individual.
yeah,
And so what resonates with one person may not resonate with another.
exactly,
Just like the food, some food you might
exactly,
like, some might not. But
exactly.
it's yeah, it's wonderful that you stepped up and did that because the world's better for it, for
Well,
sure.
thank you. I appreciate that so much. I will say to you, just a couple of weeks ago, I got a beautiful email from a person I'd known, I know, but haven't seen for many, many years. I actually knew her parents more than anything. Both David and I knew her parents. And she wrote me an email to say that when my book came out, she was intending to buy it because she wanted to support me. She's from my hometown as well, and she wanted to support me. She just hadn't gotten around to it, but she just did recently, thinking the reason she got it was for the recipes. That's why she purchased it, because she felt she'd not lost a spouse, so she didn't think that it would resonate with her. It wouldn't
Right.
pertain to her. So she got it. She said, looked at the recipes, many she's going to make. She said, and then I started to read. And she said, boy, was I wrong. She
Mm,
said she had learned so much from reading basically my story, because that's what it is. But my story involves also what I, not only going through it, but what I have learned, what
mhm.
I have learned from others going through it in what I do. And so she said, it helped me to understand the friends that I have that have lost their husbands.
Mm.
And she said, it made me understand. And she said, just knowing more about grief. I can't, she said, and I'm only on chapter 6, but I wanted you to know that this is, I can't thank you enough for writing that. Well, I just was so, my just heart just burst when she wrote that because obviously, I did write the book because of my journey and my losing a spouse. I also had lost my mom the year before. So there's
Hmm.
bits and pieces of that in there as well.
For sure.
But um, but my intention really was that anybody that has gone through any type of grief or loss, I hoped that it would help them as well and also to support others that are going through it. I mean, grief touches everybody at
Hmm.
one point in a time. I mean, it does. That you just can't get away with it, you know.
Yeah.
And so that meant a lot just getting that. So I'm hopeful that that's what people will feel when they do read the book. And if you
Yeah.
don't like to cook, there's some really, really easy recipes in there too that you could do easy, easy. So
Easy is good. I like easy.
easy. Okay, well, there's some.
Okay, well, um, I want to make sure people know how to reach you, how to
Mhm.
find you in case they
Sure.
want to work with you or to get your
Yeah.
book.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have a website and I do weekly blogs on that. And so that's www.pattycomeau-simonson.com. I'm on FaceTime and Instagram. And so you can find me there. On my website, or all three, you can ask any questions and I answer everything. I also do videos. I try to do a video that will coincide with the blog because I just want the personal piece of it, you know,
Yeah.
whatever it is. These last 2 weeks, the second week is going to be about dating after a loss, which is a huge question after a time.
Yes.
Or let's put it that way, a thought after a time, and you know what people think when they're even thinking something like that. And so that's this week is the second part of that. And so I like to do a video that kind of corresponds with whatever the blog is going to be. So I'm on that and I'm on LinkedIn. And my books are wherever you can get a book. They're on Amazon, obviously, Barnes and Noble, the publisher, Balboa Press, if you went to them. But any of the bookstores, Walmart, anywhere where you can purchase a book online, you can purchase Recipes for Healing. So, yeah,
Wonderful. That's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
Is there any last advice or anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to mention before we go?
I would. And I'm glad you asked that. Um, I want to say to everybody who has experienced a loss, whether it's recent or whether it's a long time ago, always mention their name. It
Mm.
is so important. It allows people to hear you mention their name and hopefully then make them less afraid to mention their name because that's what happens a lot of the times. People won't bring it up because they're afraid they're going to upset you or make you cry. And the chances are you've done that anyway, so it doesn't make any difference. What it does, and you probably will agree with this, Angela, is it makes you feel like um, they're thinking about that person too.
Right.
They're remembering that person. I always say, if you've got a story about someone that you'd like to tell the person who's had that loss about, do it because
Hmm.
they want to hear that. And they also, the griever, and I'm saying this from my own experience, yes, personally, but also from many, many, many that I have counseled and worked with, um, we want to talk about them.
Yeah.
It's been 33 years since David's been gone.
Mm.
And uh, he's a household name, I mean, not 24/7, of course not. But whenever he comes to mind for whatever reason, I say it. We had a past, we had a history, and
Yeah.
they matter. So
Hmm.
to me and to everyone, I would love to people to understand, if you feel like mentioning their name, please do. A quick little story in that I have a very, very good friend who lost her son 4 years ago. He was 30 years old, an adult son. And we were volunteering at a local place together and doing a job, she and I. So we were in the back room, and it was very recent then. And a thought may have come to mind or whatever, and she started to cry. And I just said, "Oh my goodness, what's the matter?" So we talked, and she explained that it was like maybe a 6-month anniversary. It was very new,
Hmm.
and she was just thinking about him and feeling really bad. So that was my first experience with, letting her speak about him as much as she could at that particular time. We've become very, very, very good friends. And last year, I said to her, we were together and with a bunch of people, and I said to her, you know what? How about if we I don't know why I said it or what made me think to do it. I'm glad I did. I said, how about if we get coffee together next week sometime, just you and I? And she said, oh, that sounds great. I said, you know why? Because really and truly, I'd love to hear more about Matthew. I'd like to know what he was like.
Mm.
And she looked at me and said, my God, Patty, nobody has ever, ever to me.
Yeah.
And I said, which surprised me, and yet it didn't. And I said, oh, I said, well, so of course she wanted to. And so we met 'cause she came to the house actually. We met for coffee. We sat for 2 hours, and she told me from the time he was born, everything, all the little things that he loved, that he liked. I mean, that mattered. And she had not been able to do that.
Mm.
So, it's so helpful to
Yeah.
people, That's the other thing. And not only is it helpful to the griever, it's so helpful that, people are asking.
Yeah.
So that's what I
Absolutely.
like to leave.
Yes. And that's important because you're right. People are afraid. And I remember being afraid to bring up um anytime, there was a loss. I was afraid to talk about that
Sure.
person. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
But
Because you
see
don't
how
know.
we evolve, we
Yes.
evolve. I mean, now that that's really, you don't. And you obviously you assess each situation naturally,
Mhm.
and you hope that you're going to know if it's the right time to say something,
Right.
because
Yeah.
there are times when you shouldn't say anything or the things that you do say
Hmm.
are not appropriate. But
Right.
uh, to the griever, I say never be afraid of mentioning their name
Yeah. Yeah,
because that's
absolutely.
important.
I love that.
Yeah,
Well, thank you again for taking the time
you're
to
welcome.
come here, and I'm sure that the listeners are going to love your book.
I
Um,
hope so.
and for sure, if this resonated with you, make sure you reach out to Patty
Yes.
so that you can
Yeah.
get some of her insights and help along the way. Thank you again.
Thank you, Angela. I appreciate it so much.
And thanks everyone for listening, and bye for now.